All right. Well, before we jump into, or rather, as we start each episode for Critical Role, we like to do a little recap where we talk about what happened in the latest episode. And then what we like to do is we like to cut that out and put it up on YouTube as a separate video. So if you're watching just the recap, down in the description is a link to our whole video discussion. That's when we actually talk about our favorite theories, thoughts, and hashtag justice for Ashton. And we want to know what you think about the episode. So that's a great place for you to go to and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. But having said that, this was episode 79 of Campaign 3. To hurt is to heal, I think. Or to heal is to hurt. One of the two.
To hurt is to heal.
Yeah. To hurt is to heal. And this episode opens up sort of on the moments before this team building event is set to transpire. If you remember, they've gone to the Fey Realm, to the Ligament Manor, because of what happened underneath Whitestone with Ashton and Fern and the Shard of Raushan 2 episodes prior. And essentially, people are making some small talk. Chetney is sort of like thinking about the nature of the Ligament Manor and grandmother Maury, and can she grant wishes? And that leads to a conversation on like, well, what would you wish for? And he talks about, to be young again. And FCG really tries to ping him in the sense of like, well, why would you want to be young again? Would it be to spend time with Deanna? And he's like, well, no. And he's like, well, then why? And is very much like putting on sort of like his therapist hat of like, what's the point? Like, why would you want to be young again? Which I think is an important detail that'll come up in the back half of this episode. Meanwhile, there's a couple of other conversations that happen. First of all, Orem, who wasn't in the previous episode because Liam wasn't present, is going to pull Ashton away from the tiki bar in the Ligament Manor and is going to basically say like, hey, let's take a walk. Let's have a conversation. Takes Ashton down to the area below the Ligament Manor and is kind of like, Ashton, I was really freaked out by what happened yesterday, but and it's very much kind of like a, hey, I need you on your best. Like we have a lot that's about to happen. And he points out that, hey, no one's coming to save us. Like it's just us. So I need you as your best self. And, really sort of gives, it was kind of like a tough love conversation, but more importantly, there was a lot of warmth from Orem that Ashton didn't necessarily get from other people in the group. So they had this great conversation. Ashton basically says like, yeah, I think I know what I want to say to try to kind of like make this right with the group. And then they return back to the tiki bar. Separately, Fern goes and finds Birdie, who's at the Maury's collection room and is like, hey, Morrigan told me you have something you should probably tell me. And Birdie's like, I think I know what it is she wants me to tell you. And so they go on this walk. They go to like this garden courtyard where there's all like the frozen people in time, like kind of the petrified people, kind of horrifying to have this heart to heart.
Yeah.
And essentially Fern's mother reveals that Ollie is in fact not her dad and that her father is actually the Sorrow Lord Zethuda of the Unseelie Court, who works directly for Seminar, one of the 5 archfays of the Feywild, and tells the story of a time when she was allured by dark impulses and originally had encountered Ollie and enjoyed tormenting Ollie, but it was then through Ollie that she discovered what love really meant. But at the time, she was with Zethuda, who basically brought Birdie to Exandria to give birth to Fern intentionally under the red light of Ruidus, to become a Ruidus born. Excuse me. And then after that happened, Birdie realized that this was more of like an intentional plan and that Zethuda seemed to sort of lose interest in her and was much more keen to talk about Ludinus and the mages that were working with him and sort of like this big deliberate plan until finally Birdie effectively ran away and sort of gave up that life. So Morgan's comment on Fern being like her mother with this meeting with Tevin is a reference to her relationship to Zethуда, and that Zethуда knows that Fern exists, and that it's not and that Zethуда has tried in the past to retrieve Fern, but knows better than to invade on Morgan's domain. There's a couple of funny lines here about Birdie being like, me and Ollie are still your parents, and Ollie's still your dad. We're still the ones who raised you, even though he's not your dad. Kind of like your cliche line. And Fern's like, yeah, well, I mean, you weren't really around, but that's fine, sure. Eventually they head back to the group. They get back to the tiki bar. They're asking Allura some questions about what does she know about Grandmother Morgan? Who's the Moonweaver? What do you know about Saminar and Zethуда? And Allura sort of gives like the classic NPC lore dump on, Saminar is one of the Archfays and is mysterious and isn't quite involved. The Unseelie Court is kind of defined by violence and these other impulses, not necessarily evil, but a bit more chaotic. But then also gives a detail that Zethуда holds the blade Duskhunger of the Eternal Flame, I think, or of the Black Flame. Duskhunger of the Black Flame, I think. To which the party instantly is like, we have to get that sword. Like, no matter what, we have to get it.
Bring me that sword.
It's around this time that Morgan comes back with FCG, who she's been planning the team building with, and FCG's memory has been wiped, and is like, it's going to be great. I don't remember what it is, but it's going to be good. And they agree that the 3 areas to discuss in this team building event is honesty, communication, and trust. And they will have 3 trials around these things, all around trying to restore what has happened to the team. Morgan gives them some tea to initiate the beginning of this event, and then we go to break. So you want to take it from there?
Yes, sir. So we pick up with the second half with this first event taking place. And essentially what happens is Bell's Hells find themselves hurtling down this massive chasm. And the chasm is like sheer. The walls are like completely straight down, impossible to climb. And Morgan has thrown a monocle down in here as well. And she's like, find the monocle, bring it back up to the top. The catch being that the only way to climb back up is for the party to reveal truths about themselves. If they do, then parts of the sheer cliff will morph into climbable terrain, if you will. Matt does get pretty creative with it, but that's the gist of it. Okay, so for the sake of brevity, this was an amazing section. But for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to go through each of the truths that every character revealed during this segment. They do ultimately successfully retrieve the monocle and climb and bring it back to Morgan. But in the process of that, FCG says that they enjoy silver more than copper, a big reveal. But then they also say that they pity the rest of Bell's Hells because they have beating hearts and opportunities, but don't do enough with them. And also that deep down, they feel really good whenever they hurt or kill something. It helps them relax and relieve their stress. And finally, FCG reveals that they are worried that they might have put all their eggs in one basket with the Changebringer. And sorry if the Changebringer betrays them all. Next up, we have Imogen. And she says that she is genuinely scared to meet her mom again. She loves Laudna deeply, but is disgusted at the thought of Delilah basically watching the two of them all the time from, behind her eyes. She also says that she knows they're supposed to save the gods, but she's tried talking to various gods her whole life, and none of them ever responded. So that made her feel tainted, and she doesn't know if she wants to save gods that don't love her. And finally, she tells Fern that she was really disappointed in her for running away from the shard and running away from her power. Next up, we've got Chetney, who says that wood is better than metal. He also says that He fears that there's a dwindling interest in wood and wooden toys and that children will soon find them obsolete. And therefore, he fears he is becoming obsolete with each passing year that he grows older. And finally, Chetney may have the biggest bomb of them all in this section where he reveals some of his backstory. He says that he grew up in the Bramblewood outside of Western, and when he was a kid, he came back from learning to make toys and found that his whole family had abandoned him. All that were left behind were toys. They ran when Erevan the Rhyme Lord was running across the plains, and so he says he's afraid of dragons. And he says he has 5 siblings: Alabaster, Pepper, Sugarplum, Hermie, and Jad. And that he was so mad when they left that he never went and looked for any of them, and now they're probably all dead. So he thinks that any family he has is just going to ultimately leave him, and that's why he doesn't ever make attachments to people. Next up, we have Laudna. And she says that deep down inside, both Delilah and I kind of want the shard. She does say, like, she wants Fern to have it, but just deep down, she no longer knows what are her feelings, opinions, and desires, and what are Delilah's. And finally, she says that sometimes she fantasizes of just abandoning this quest to save the world and just living her own life. Next up, we have Orem, and he says that he is super lonely all of the time, especially at night, and it doesn't matter if he's like bunking with one of Bell's Hells or not. He's still just incredibly lonely. He also reveals that he laughs it off, but he does secretly wonder if Chetney is his dad. And he finally says, or excuse me, 2 more things. He says he loves all of Bell's Hells, but he has spent time thinking about how to neutralize each and every one of them if it were to come to it. And finally, he says he really misses Dorian, but sometimes he thinks that's okay, and sometimes he doesn't. Next up, we have Ashton, who says that, they reveal that they are the reason that Gianna Hexam robbery went sideways, and they're the reason why they got thrown out of the window, and they feel like they deserved getting left by the nobodies. Also, Ashton reveals that anytime it's too quiet, they start worrying about that one of them is going to kill another one of them accidentally, and that they've panicked thinking about what happens when that happens. And finally, Ashton admits that they feel worse about messing with Fern's life in the whole shard debacle, more so than they are upset about what happened to themselves, and wishes that they would have died instead of hurting Fern. And finally, Fern reveals that she feels like they're very ill-equipped for this job of saving the world, and she thinks they're going to fail. And then she says that she does stuff to the rest of Bell's Hells while they're sleeping. Not weird stuff, just like to look at you and sometimes touch you. Nothing bad, she says. So after all those truths are revealed, successfully giving the monocle back to Morrigan, they complete the quest, and Morrigan actually gives them the monocle, which is a magical item that does not require attunement, but allows you to detect magic once a day, see invisibility twice a day, and use Arcane Eye once a day. Next, the group decides to do the test of communication. So, Mori kind of spews out fog, and the next thing they know, Bell's Hells find themselves in this chamber where they can only see about like 100 feet in any direction. And in the center is a thunder wasp hive, and the wasps react to large sounds and panicking. Morgan asks for 3 volunteers. Ashton, Imogen, and Chetney raise their hands, and then skin grows over their eyes, so they're blind. And Matt gives out blindfolds to each of Travis, Laura, and Taliesin. And so this was so much fun. So out of game, the players are wearing blindfolds, and Matt puts this board in front of them that has like a path that he has drawn out. And so each of those players that are blindfolded have to take a mini and guide it successfully down that exact path, using only the guidance that the non-blindfolded players give them. In universe, that player, in game, Chetney, is transported to like this other place with just this massive chasm on either side and just like the narrowest of paths he can walk, and he must walk to the end. So much fun. Chetney successfully navigates, because he's the one that does it first, mostly thanks to Liam and Sam's guidance. So the next round, when Laura goes, Matt describes Orem and FCG's mouths like growing over and being sewn shut, so they can no longer help. So Laura goes, and she is successful as well. And then after that round, Chetney and Laudna's mouths are sewn shut because they were the ones that guided her. So for Ashton, we just have Imogen and Fern left to guide them. Unfortunately, though, due to some poor rolls and some wasps, like I mentioned earlier, those came in when the party got too loud and basically made the DC more difficult. Ashton does unfortunately fail towards the very end and falls into the abyss. But since it is just like a test, he just appears back again, and Morgan's like, sorry, you guys failed, but I'll give you one more chance. You can go one more time, but it'll be real. So, like, if you fall, you fall. And Orem volunteers to do this. And he's allowed to pick 2 people to guide him. And so he picks Chetney and Imogen. Matt also slams down an hourglass for this one. For the previous ones, there was no time limit, but for this one, there's 5 minutes. However, they're able to easily breeze through it in about 3.5 minutes with no setbacks. So they are successful in this trial of communication. And Maury gives them a magical Scarf of Intrusive Intent, which lets you cast Suggestion once a day, Magic Mouth twice a day, and Fear once a day. Also, no attunement. So, for the final test, they are once again surrounded by fog, and they find themselves like deep in the Fey Forest. And Maury says, you must learn to trust one another. This is the trial of trust. There are 3 altars somewhere in the surrounding forest, and on each is an ivory branch. Just get that and bring it back to me and lay it in this central well here. That's it. And they're like, okay. But she's like, here's the catch. And 2 doppelgangers walk up. And she says, these doppelgangers have been studying you this whole time. They know you in and out. You're going to have to figure out which 2 of you are going to be replaced by the doppelgangers before they ruin the game. And that's where the episode ends. Again, that was episode 79. To hurt is to heal. And,
Great job, man.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot. But once again, our recap, if you're on that video and you want to hear our full thoughts, it will be linked down in the description below.